Welcome to the webinar for Renewable Energy for Pennsylvania Farms. My name is Jessie Swisher and I am the Western Region Program Coordinator for Pasa, which is the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture. And I'm joined here today with Ryan Hamilton. He is a resident attorney at Fairshake Environmental Legal Services, a nonprofit law firm that provides legal services for modest means clients in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Ryan's practice focuses on providing legal tools to build sustainable communities. His work supports individuals, nonprofits, and small businesses striving to advance their own missions while simultaneously supporting their community and the environment. Ryan's interest in environmental law and sustainability stems from growing up on a family-run orchard in eastern Pennsylvania and 2 years working with AmeriCorps Vista. Ryan received his JD with a certificate in environmental and natural resource law from Lewis and Clark Law School in Portland, Oregon, and he now resides in Pittsburgh. Before turning the presentation over to Ryan tonight, I'd like to just start with a few housekeeping items. So first of all, everyone should be able to view the PowerPoint slides. Also, everyone is on mute. So as we go along, if you think of any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type a question into the question panel on the right-hand side of your control panel. And once we reach the end of the presentation, I will walk through the questions out loud for Ryan to respond to. If we don't have enough time in our hour today, we can also work on following up with you by email as well. We have a different audio option, so if there is any trouble with the audio through the webinar, you may also call in, and you can see the audio options available on your dashboard on the right also. There are a few handouts also uploaded to your dashboard under the handouts section. You can open them at any time by simply clicking on them. You can save them and print, but we will also email those out at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Ryan.
All right, thank you, Jesse. I hope everyone can hear me and see me as I get the presentation started here. I want to thank Jesse and Pasa for hosting this webinar. These free educational opportunities are really only one piece of what Pasa does, and I think it's really great to be a part of that. So I'm excited to be with you here to talk about renewable energy opportunities for Pennsylvania farmers. Energy, or more specifically electricity, is something that I think we take for granted until it isn't there, until you flip a switch and suddenly the lights don't turn on. The need for energy impacts every aspect of our lives, from the alarm clock that wakes you up in the morning to the heating and cooling systems that operate in our homes and offices, the technology that helps you run your farm, and even the computer that you're probably using to view this webinar all rely on some kind of energy. So the two questions that I want you to keep in mind while we're talking today are, number one, where does our energy come from? And number two, how can we meet our growing energy needs in a sustainable way? While I think this webinar could be beneficial for households across the state, I think it's especially advantageous for sustainability-focused farmers because, generally speaking, farmers have significantly more land or building space to install renewable technologies. As a commercial business and a farm, you'll have more energy needs than a typical household. And I think farmers have a higher than typical vested interest in the long-term environmental health and economic success of their properties, with many farms in Pennsylvania being handed down through generations. So when you're implementing these renewable technologies, your return on investment lasts that much longer. So the goal of this webinar is really to outline a few ways that communities and individuals, but especially farmers in Pennsylvania, can utilize renewable energy technologies to sustainably meet their own energy needs in a way that limits the amount of environmentally harmfully produced electricity on the grid, helps to stabilize or reduce energy costs, and hopefully in some cases can provide an additional source of income. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Jesse already gave me an introduction, but my name's Ryan Hamilton. I grew up on an orchard in eastern Pennsylvania. I did my undergraduate degree at Juniata College in central PA. I graduated from Lewis and Clark Law School in Portland, Oregon, and now I'm an attorney working with Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services here in Pittsburgh. Fair Shake is a recently new organization, and we got our start because we saw this need for access to environmental legal services for modest means clients. More often than not, we found that cost was the biggest hindrance for stopping someone from obtaining legal advice. And Fair Shake is really set up to provide those types of clients with the legal services that they need at costs that they can afford. So the practice that I'm building is focused on providing legal tools for sustainable communities across Pennsylvania in the areas of environment, energy, and small business law. And that can mean litigation related to almost any environmental matter. It can mean writing, reviewing, or enforcing contracts, leases, or other agreements related to renewable energy development. It can also be in the form of general advice for small businesses in formation or growth stages. But tonight we're really going to talk about renewable energy and specifically how renewable energy can support agricultural producers across Pennsylvania. This is my legal disclaimer slide. It just explains that today I'm going to be providing you with very general advice, and if you have questions about your specific interests, you should consult an attorney or another professional for those answers. So I've already kind of said it, but being able to partner with Pasa on this webinar is exciting for me because I see renewable energy as a way to contribute to Pasa's mission of promoting profitable farms that produce healthy food for all people while respecting the natural environment. From my perspective, renewable energy technologies can help farmers across Pennsylvania reduce energy costs, increase profits, and continue doing what they do well, producing our food, all while producing electricity in a less harmful way. So to really get things started, first we're going to talk about the electricity system. I think it's important that everyone has a sort of basic understanding of the physics behind the system, but also the regulatory framework for that system. Then we're going to talk about how we generate our electricity in Pennsylvania. We're going to look at some graphs, and we'll talk about the renewable energy policies that we have here in Pennsylvania that are encouraging more renewable electric generation. Then we'll get to the real sort of meat of the webinar, which is talking about the different renewable energy technologies that I think are potentially applicable for farmers in Pennsylvania, those being biogas, wind, geothermal, and solar. And very importantly, we'll talk about the potential financial resources that are available for you to implement these technologies. Lastly, we'll close just by mentioning a few steps that I think we can all take to encourage more renewable energy development in Pennsylvania. So to get things started, I think it's important to understand that our electric system is a real-time energy delivery system. And this means that power is generated, transported, and distributed or supplied the moment you flip a switch. And the way I think about it, there's really those three portions of the electricity system: generation, transmission, and distribution. In the early days of electricity, energy systems were small and localized. It all really began with the Pearl Street Station in New York City, launched in 1882. It connected a 100-volt generator that burned coal to power a few hundred lamps in that neighborhood. And these small systems like this started popping up across the country, and state and local governments began establishing regulations to control how those systems were coming online and providing electricity. But the public found that the prices for this electricity just became outrageous. And that sparked federal regulations and projects to provide electricity to rural areas. By the 1930s, electric utilities became well established as these regulated monopolies. They were known as vertically integrated utilities, meaning that they provided all three major aspects of the electricity system, from generation to transmission to distribution. And these systems became larger and larger. They started crossing state lines, providing more electricity, transmitting it further. And we began to think, maybe this isn't an efficient way to do this. So in 1978, Congress passed the Public Utilities Regulatory Policies Act, or PURPA, which opened the door to private power plants to start selling electricity. In the 1990s, there was more rules that led to more deregulation. And suddenly we have private companies taking pieces of this electricity system and making it much more efficient. So today we're at a point where we're balancing reliability of our electricity with cost to customers, and most importantly, I think, for our conversation today, the impacts on environmental and human health. So this slide is interesting. This shows how we generate all of our electricity in Pennsylvania, the source of our generation. And you'll notice that nuclear is actually our largest electric generation source, with natural gas and coal not far behind. And at the bottom there, you'll see that renewables are making up a small portion of our electric system. This chart is interesting to me because, as an environmental attorney, a lot of work that I see every day relates to the harmful environmental and human health impacts associated with coal extraction and natural gas development. So any opportunity that I see to reduce the amount of that we do and increase the amount of energy that we generate through clean renewable sources, I think it's important to have that conversation and work through the best way to do that. So generally, there's several policy ways that we can influence how our electricity is generated. And at the federal level, probably the most recent and the most controversial method for decreasing the harmful impacts of traditional electric power plants is the Clean Power Plan. In 2008, coal provided 49% of the nation's power. This year, it was down to 36%, and the EPA expects it to be closer to 27% by 2030. The Clean Power Plan was finalized this past August, and it seeks to continue to reduce carbon emissions from electric power plants. So states are working to develop plans that can meet these carbon emission reduction targets. And one way to do that is to simply make these coal-fired power plants more efficient. But another way is to simply reduce the amount of electricity that we're generating from those plants and increase the amount of electricity that we're generating from carbon-free renewable generation. In fact, the EPA is encouraging this method of reducing carbon emissions through EPA's Clean Energy Incentive Program, which rewards early investments by states in renewable energy generation and demand-side energy efficiency through matching funds. But the states also have other tools at their disposal for increasing renewable energy generation sources. And I want to talk about two of those ways that states have available to them. The first one I'm going to talk about is a feed-in tariff. And this is legislation that requires utilities to pay government-mandated rates for renewable power over a guaranteed period of time. Essentially, it's a long-term contract, so over 10 or 20 years, ensuring that premium prices will be paid for this renewable energy generation. And this stabilizes the market so that the utilities are assured they can meet their renewables requirements, and it also makes it easier for renewables investors and developers to build new renewable energy projects. These feed-in tariffs are pretty popular and successful in Europe, but only a handful of states are implementing them here in the US, and Pennsylvania is not one of them. So we're not going to dwell on that too long. But the second way that states are able to encourage more renewable energy generation is through a renewable portfolio standard. And Pennsylvania does do this, and in Pennsylvania we call it the Alternative Energy Standard. But generally, a renewable portfolio standard is a law requiring a utility to provide a specific percentage of its electricity from a list of qualifying energy generation sources, generally, wind, solar, by a certain date. The obligation on the utility to purchase these types of power, these types of energy on the open market reduces our dependence on fossil fuel generated electricity and stimulates new markets for these renewable sources. Currently, more than half the states in the US have some type of renewable portfolio standard, but they're all a little bit different. There have been proposals for a federal renewable portfolio standard, but that has failed to pass, so we see something a little bit different in every state. So in Pennsylvania, our renewable portfolio standard, known as the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, was established with Act 213 in 2004. And our Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard came with two key mandates. The first is this requirement for utilities to purchase certain amounts of their electric from renewable or alternative energy sources. And as you'll see, we've divided these qualifying sources into two tiers. Under Tier 1, utilities are required to generate or to purchase a certain percent of their electricity from sources such as solar, wind, low-impact hydropower, geothermal, biogas, and coal mine methane. You'll see there's a second tier of alternative energy sources, and these include waste coal, demand-side management, large-scale hydropower, municipal solid waste, and even integrated combined coal gasification technology. But generally, you'll see that in 2015 to 2016, in this year, utilities are required to purchase 13.7% of their electricity from alternative energy sources. And every year, this mandate is going to increase until we get to 2020, when Pennsylvania is required to purchase 18% of our electricity from alternative energy sources. Recently, there was in this past year, there was a bill proposed by Representative Greg Vitale in Pennsylvania to increase that Tier 1 requirement to 15% by 2023, which would really bump up our total requirements, but that bill hasn't passed. In other states, for instance, in New Jersey, they have a mandate for 22.5% by 2020. In Maryland, it's 20% by 2020. Hawaii is 40% by 2030. And New York is currently 29% by 2015. But I recently saw a proposal by the governor suggesting that they want to shoot for 50% by 2030. So I think this really just goes to show you that it's technologically and economically feasible to generate a significant amount of our energy from renewable sources. And that means that there's an opportunity for everyone, but especially farmers with the land opportunity and the inclination to get involved in this. But it's important to understand the second portion of that portfolio standard mandate, and that is net metering. So the Act 213 also created this opportunity for customer generators or someone generating electricity on their property to continue to rely on electricity from the grid, but to interconnect their renewable system to the grid and essentially net meter the difference of electricity that they're producing from the electricity that they're providing to the grid. So if I have a solar array on the roof of my home or my barn, for instance, I'll be producing a certain amount of electricity during the day. I won't be producing any at night, but I may have energy needs when I'm not producing electricity. So the net metering allows for a bidirectional meter that credits how much I'm putting onto the grid and how much I'm taking off. At the end of the year, that credit system is balanced out, and the customer generator, me with the solar array on my roof, will be paid at full retail rates for any electricity that I generated beyond what I had used. So this is really exciting because it means when you put a renewable energy generation source on your property, you know there's going to be a demand for that electricity, and you're going to get credited at full retail rates. The challenge is that the size of the system is limited. So you can't simply produce a huge, you can't put together a huge renewable generation project on your property because then you start to look like an electric generation supplier rather than a customer generator. But the law also allows for virtual net metering, which means that even if you're not if you have two properties, you can produce energy on one of them and receive credits for that energy on a second property. There are limits on this, however, because you're not able to credit that second property if it's further than 2 miles from the generation source, and the same owner-operator has to own both properties. So if you decide net metering is right for you, and for most customer generators it is, you're going to be able to operate in parallel with the grid, and the Public Utility Commission has developed interconnection procedures for these small customer generators that starts with an interconnection request to the distributor, and then you need to demonstrate that you've met certain technical standards, and then there'll be a review process to ensure that that's all going well. And to the extent that disputes arise, the PUC provides an informal dispute resolution process. But generally, this is something that goes smoothly. So that leads me to begin talking about community solar. Whenever we talk about net metering, someone always wants to talk about community solar. And really, this is about generating electricity that can be shared by more than one household, sometimes called a solar garden or shared solar. And actually, the White House has recently been pushing for community solar as a solution for bringing renewable energy to low and moderate income households. It really makes sense in situations where homeowners don't have access to roof space or financing to put up their own system, but they can buy a few panels and a system down the road, and they would essentially virtually net meter their ownership of that system to credit their own bills. But in Pennsylvania, our net metering laws make this challenging, impossible maybe. But in states like Minnesota, they've been quite progressive with this, and utilities are required to purchase all output from community solar gardens and bill those credits to subscribers' utility bills. There's other states like New Hampshire and Maine that also have pretty progressive community solar programs. But here in Pennsylvania, we're not entirely restricted in what we can do. There's other almost community solar options, such as a nonprofit model where you can donate solar credits to a nonprofit, or a government-hosted model where a local government can take on responsibility for generating some renewable energy. There might even be a cooperative model where you could band together in a neighborhood and decide to all purchase your electricity together, or a volume purchasing model where essentially you and your neighbors get together and attempt to purchase renewable systems in bulk from installers at better rates. But that's really just an aside. And what I really want to talk about today are these 4 renewable energy technologies: biogas, wind energy, geothermal, and solar energy. And I want to talk about how farmers in Pennsylvania can access these renewable sources and really make them part of their sustainable farming operation. And I think there's sort of 4 avenues for doing that. And the first one is renewable energy off the grid, meaning just a standalone renewable electric generation source used to meet energy needs at the source. The second one is grid supported, and that's renewable electric generation source providing power to you and the grid using net metering, as I had described before. The third avenue is hosting a generation project. And that's where maybe a large-scale development project occurs on your property, and you can benefit from that. And then the last one is community projects that we've already talked about. So one of the handouts that's available through this webinar outlines some of these basic opportunities. So you should feel free to take a look at that. But I'll also mention them as I'm discussing these 4 renewable technologies that we have here that we're going to talk about today. So we'll start with biogas. Basically, biogas energy is produced through anaerobic digestion, which is the process where plant and animal material is converted into useful products by microorganisms in the absence of air. The useful products from the digestion process are biogas and digestate. Biogas is made up of about 60% methane, 40% carbon dioxide, and small amounts of other gases. Digestate is the wet product that is comprised of plant nutrients and partially decomposed matter. The biogas is used to create electricity, often through a combined heat and power system. And the digestate can be used as fertilizer, bedding, mulch, or potting soil. Manure digester systems have been implemented on farms in the United States since the late 1970s, but the industry is really still in its infancy, and technological advances are making it more possible to have smaller scale projects and more economically viable projects. Traditionally, they were installed for manure management, air quality and water quality concerns, also odor management. But today, with our renewable portfolio standards in place and net metering ability, I think electricity generation is really a really good opportunity to also get involved here. The real challenge is being able to find a site where you have the manure needs of an anaerobic digestion system that can make it economically viable. So generally you're going to need more than 75 cows or the equivalent of manure. but that shouldn't necessarily stop you. So one way to get around that requirement for a lot of manure is by forming a cooperative. And a cooperative is a type of business organization controlled and operated by a group of users or members for their own benefit. And you might be able to develop a successful anaerobic digester system by either an existing cooperative providing services related to the adoption of the technology, or you could have a group of similarly situated farmers form a separate entity that addresses their specific needs with a centralized digester system, collecting manure from local farms, providing shipping services, and relieving cooperative members of the management burden of operating the digester. So that's also a possibility. One example of a farm that's been successfully operating a digester is the Oregon Dairy Farm in Lancaster County, and they are, I believe, the second oldest digester system in the state. They have about 385 cows, and the system costs them $125,000, but they've made that up in their energy savings over the years. A more recent example is the Somerset County Dairy Farm. Sorry, the Hillcrest Sailor Farm in Somerset County. And they've been operational since 2006. The digester has. They have about 600 cows contributing to the digester for combined heat and power. And the total project cost was about $900,000, which may sound significant, but they found some really creative financing opportunities to make it possible, such as a grant through the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and they also partnered with Native Energy for upfront purchases of their carbon offsets, and they found matching funds to really make this possible. I think the future of biogas is really going to see an increase in this type of technology, and it's going to be across not only for manure but also for food waste and other types of biological waste that can go into these systems and be used to generate electricity. So, and in Pennsylvania, we've already developed a general permit for mixing or blending of animal manure, grease trap waste, and food scraps to meet electricity needs, to use the digestate that's left over for useful animal bedding, and also you're able to use the liquid wastewater that's left over as a soil additive. So Pennsylvania's getting there because we've already formed a permit that sort of regulates how this happens, but I think we have a way to go. For instance, in Massachusetts, in just October 2014, the state in Massachusetts implemented a commercial food waste disposal ban, and they essentially then established an organics to energy program which supported education and outreach to develop these anaerobic digester technologies. And the CRMC bioenergy facility is one of these large facilities that's taking in food waste and other types of organic waste and converting it into biogas and electricity. So that's a really exciting thing that's out there. I think if you're interested in biogas energy, I'd also point you toward the EPA's AgStar program. They have a lot of great resources, and if you look at the handouts that are provided, you'll find a list of further resources for all of these different technologies. The second technology I want to talk about is wind energy. And wind is created by the unequal heating of the Earth's surface by the sun. The wind's kinetic energy can be harnessed by a wind turbine. The wind moves the turbine's blades, which transfer energy through a central hub to a generator, and the generator converts this mechanical energy into electric energy that can be delivered to the power grid or wherever you need it to be delivered to. So generally, when I think about opportunities for farmers to get involved in wind energy, I think there's sort of two avenues. The small-scale development, where you're producing wind energy on your farm for your needs and maybe selling some of it back to the grid. And then there's the large-scale development, where your farm or your property would essentially be hosting a larger system. And for these small-scale systems, you're going to need an average annual wind speed of about 10 miles per hour and more for these larger systems. And anyone can conduct a wind energy study on their property to determine what kinds of possibilities are out there for their system. That might be one way that you can use to determine whether, you're able to produce the kind of energy that would make a project like this economically viable. Generally, for a small-scale residential system, zoning and permitting don't tend to be a problem. Occasionally, there will be local height ordinances that limit how tall your wind turbine could be, but you can often work with an attorney to apply for a variance from these limitations. If you're going to be hosting a large-scale system, one of your typical concerns will be space requirements. And it's good to know that these large turbines, these multi-million-dollar turbines that you see dotting hillsides, they take up a relatively limited surface area, something like 1/4 of an acre, including access roads. And that leaves the land open for farming and other uses. But one thing that you'll want to be careful about is signing a lease and developing the type of lease that's protective of your property and how you want to use your property, but still allows for that wind energy development to occur. So currently, if your property is in agricultural preservation, you're able to grant use for right-of-ways for installation of water, sewage, electric lines, even mining for coal and other minerals or natural gas lines. But you're not able to site a wind turbine on your property. Recently, though, there was a bill proposed in this last year, House Bill 188, which tried to change this and which would allow for which would add wind power generation to that list, meaning it could be conducted on preserved farmland. So that's just something to think about. It's out there. It hasn't happened yet, but it might be happening in the future. So the third type of energy production that I want to talk about is geothermal energy, and specifically geothermal through the use of heat pumps, which form a closed-loop system. Nearly 40% of all U.S. emissions of carbon dioxide are the result of heating, cooling, and hot water systems in residential and commercial buildings. So I think being able to use geothermal energy to provide these needs of heating and cooling is really a great opportunity to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions and heat and cool our homes and buildings in a more sustainable way. And how it works is you'll form a closed loop system which take advantage of the constant year-round temperature of about 50 degrees Fahrenheit that's just a few feet below the ground surface. And either air or antifreeze liquid is pumped through these closed pipes that are buried underground, and they're recirculated through the building. In the summer, the liquid moves heat from the building into the ground, and in the winter, it does the opposite, providing pre-warmed air and water to the heating system of the building. And these systems are about 300 to 600% energy efficient, meaning that they generate that much more energy than they use. So it's really exciting, and it's incredible to think that we can use this relatively simple technology to heat and cool our buildings. And one question I had when I started learning more about this was, why isn't it in place everywhere? Why isn't everyone using this? And it turns out that the answer to that question is the cost. These systems are going to cost twice as much as your traditional heating and cooling systems. But I think what people don't realize is that with the savings you have for producing your own energy, you're going to get a return on that investment in 5 to 10 years. And these systems are expected to provide this type of service for at least 25 years for the inside portions of the system, and the ground loop systems for 50 or more years. So the last type of technology that I want to talk to you about today is solar. Solar or photovoltaic cells convert sunlight directly to electricity. Most photovoltaic cells are made primarily of silicon, and they're arranged on rectangular panels that I'm sure you've seen on roofs or somewhere along the roadway. And when sunlight hits a cell, the energy knocks electrons free of their atoms, allowing them to flow through this material. This results in a direct current, or DC electricity, which is then sent to a power inverter for conversion to AC, or alternating current, which is the form of electric power that we generally use in our homes and businesses. But this isn't the only kind of way we can use solar. We can also use solar through solar thermal. And what this is these are solar thermal collectors use heat-absorbing panels and a series of attached circulation tubes to heat water, which can then flow through buildings. A really exciting use I saw of this was in a greenhouse where they had a solar thermal collector which sent hot water or heated up a cement pad within the greenhouse, and meant that they could keep temperatures in there pretty constant year-round, and were able to produce produce much longer into the year. Recently, the National Renewable Energy Labs conducted a technical feasibility study for solar potential in Pennsylvania, and found that we could produce enough solar energy to provide our current electricity needs within the state almost 4.5 times over. So I think we have an enormous solar potential and this source of clean, carbon-free energy that's severely underutilized. And one way that we can think about using solar in kind of untraditional ways is through third-party ownership. There's companies like Solar City who are only beginning to operate in Pennsylvania, where they will finance and construct a solar system on your home. They will maintain that system and own that system, so you don't have to deal with any of that headache, even though it's not really that much of a headache, but they will do that for you, and then you can form a power purchase agreement with them to buy that electricity. And one example of a farm that's utilizing solar power in Pennsylvania is Frankfurt Farms in Butler County. They're the world's first solar-powered flour mill. In 2011, they installed a solar system, I believe in stages, but they are now using solar to power their farm, their mill, their home, and even their food warehouse. So I think that's really exciting, and it shows you that these opportunities are out there. If you've been following renewable energy or thinking about getting solar recently, you may have heard of the Pennsylvania Sunshine Program, and this was created in 2008 to provide rebates for the cost of solar systems across Pennsylvania for residential homeowners and small businesses. Unfortunately, though, this system ran out of money at the end of 2013. Recently, House Bill 200 was proposed to provide a dedicated funding source for this Sunshine Solar Program, but it doesn't look like it's passed yet. But that's something to keep your eye on as another financial opportunity for if you're interested in installing solar. And that's really kind of my segue into the discussion of financial resources that are available for you if you decide that you're interested in implementing any of these renewable energy technologies on your farm. And the first incentive I want to talk about is the federal tax incentives. So currently there's a residential renewable energy tax credit, sometimes referred to as the solar income tax credit. And it allows a taxpayer to claim a credit of 30% of qualified expenditures for a system installed and utilized at the residence. And that applies to solar, electric, solar water heating, geothermal heat pumps, small wind energy development. But the problem is that this tax credit is expiring. So the system has to be placed in service on or before December 31st, 2016. And when the tax credit expires, that residential tax credit will drop from 30% to zero. That's not the case for the commercial income tax credit. Currently, there's still a 30% tax credit for commercial businesses investing in renewables, but that's going to drop to 10% at the end of 2016. There's no indication that these tax credits are going to be extended, but there's an opportunity now to take advantage of them. The second financial resource that I want to talk about are energy loans from AFC First. And they provide low payment loans for homeowners installing Energy Star or high efficiency products. They're out of Allentown, Pennsylvania, and they can provide fixed rate financing with monthly payment plans that can be offset by energy savings. Typically, it's going to be loans of $1,000 to $25,000, and they have a process that you can use to obtain those loans. But along with that, you should also look into Pennsylvania's regional sustainable energy funds. These funds provide both loans and grants, loans up to $1 million for renewable energy projects within the state that support their ratepayers. So, for instance, if you're in the West Penn Power region, they're currently accepting applications for grants, and you should check them out. But all of these organizations are in Pennsylvania. They're providing grants and loans to implement just the kinds of renewable energy technologies that I talked about today. But probably one of the most exciting and important financial resources that I should mention today is the USDA Rural Energy for America program. And through the REAP program, and you'll notice that some of the handouts are related to this program, so you'll want to take a look at those. But they provide grant and loan funding for agricultural producers and rural small businesses to purchase or install renewable energy systems, or even to make energy efficiency improvements. They're going to provide loans for up to 75% of the total project, and grants for up to 25% of total project costs. But you can also combine grants and loans to meet your needs. Eligible applicants are going to be agricultural producers with at least 50% of their gross income coming from agricultural operations. And small businesses will need to be within certain rural areas, generally with a population of less than 50,000, but I believe they have a map that you can consult to determine if you fall within one of those areas. And funds can be used to purchase, install, construct systems, including biomass, geothermal, and small-scale wind development. And there's also funds available for energy efficiency improvements, such as insulation, lighting, cooling, and refrigeration units. And applications are accepted year-round, but I believe they have an open application process right now. And if you're interested in this, you should definitely get in touch with Amanda Hope. She is the State Energy Coordinator for this program, and her contact information is up there for you to write down. So with that, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts for what I think are opportunities for change or things that we can all do to further renewable energy possibilities. And at the federal level, I think that means talking to your congresspeople or elected officials about extending the renewable energy income tax credit. You know, that 30% credit is really significant. They found that it definitely led to an increase in renewable energy development, and I think extending that tax credit would be one way to really increase the amount of renewable energy that's developed and produced in Pennsylvania. At the state level, you can talk to your elected officials about increasing those alternative energy portfolio standards that we discussed. So that House bill that wanted to increase it by 2023. It didn't pass this year, but I think if you talk to your elected officials, we're going to see that that standard increasing steadily year after year, and that's going to be important for you if you're planning to net meter or produce energy on your property as well. Finally, at the local level, I think there's certain things that you can do to prepare your local government for renewable energy development, such as passing favorable zoning and land use ordinances. You might even have an opportunity to conduct wind surveys on your property to determine if it's a suitable site for large-scale development, and that could be a way to attract that type of a development if that's something you're interested in. With that, I think I will take questions.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. We did have a few questions come in, and just a reminder to anyone else that has a question, go ahead and type it into your side panel. So pretty early in your presentation, within your first 10 or 15 minutes, you had a bar graph, and Carl asks, is biomass to energy listed in other renewables?
That's a good question. Let's go back to that bar graph. I imagine it is, because it's a little bit different than, yeah, actually, but biogas would probably be in other renewables in that slide.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but you could always check the, I took this from the Energy Information Administration. They have a lot of great resources. If you want to look back at that, that would be a way to find out.
Great. Also, when you were speaking of a model for community-supported solar, I have a suggestion from Jack in Northeast PA, who says that cleanenergy.coop is a great example also there as well.
Oh, excellent. That's great to hear.
Yeah. Carl also asks, is there a need to include fire safety precautions with all this renewable energy?
That's a good question, Carl, and especially when it comes to the interconnection standards when you're applying to net meter your renewable energy. They're going to go through all kinds of safety and technology checks that are going to kind of, I think, alleviate any concerns you would have with fire hazard. And, you know, to be honest, I haven't heard of any problems like that, but I think that's largely because there's a lot of sort of safety and technology inspections that take place to make sure your system isn't causing those kinds of problems.
Thanks. Joe asks, what about renewable energy credit market as a way to help offset purchase price of the system?
Yeah, that's actually a great point, Joe, and I neglected to mention renewable energy credits. So when you're generating electricity, you don't only have an opportunity to sell the electricity back to the grid, but if you're generating electricity from a renewable source, you're also getting what they call a renewable energy credit. And this is how utilities can keep track of whether they're meeting their portfolio standards. So I think it's something like a megawatt of energy is equal to 1 credit. And you're able to trade those credits. The utility needs to purchase them essentially to meet their portfolio standards. So as a generator, you could potentially sell those credits. In Pennsylvania, we have an open market, which means you're able to buy and sell credits from the region, not just within Pennsylvania. And that's sort of been a hindrance to making these kind of economically successful because the market isn't that great for them. I think you can definitely sell them, but it's going to be challenging to finance your renewable project just on those renewable credits. But it's good that you pointed that out because that credit system is something that I skipped over, and you know, if there's improvements to the way our credit market is currently operated, I think that really could bring a boost to that market and would allow you to benefit from selling those credits. So I think that's important to point out. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll also just mention here that Joe actually is implementing these different systems on his farm, Five Elements Farm in Armstrong County, and Pasa will be looking to put together a workshop on his farm for anyone interested in coming out to see the systems on a farm and learn from a farmer who's been there and done that. So stay tuned for that coming in the spring. And while I'm on the mode of announcements, I'll also say that we're looking to bring to the Pittsburgh area a solar installation workshop. This will be a 5-day intensive workshop training that will actually allow you to be certified in solar installation in collaboration with our partner Blue Rock Station out of Ohio. So folks can stay tuned for these programs coming to Western PA in the spring. We're at the top of the hour. There are a few more questions, so if anyone needs to drop off, feel free. I'll just go through these couple questions that we still have here, though. Dawn asks, what is the current estimated cost to install an anaerobic digester on a 700-cow dairy farm?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, I can't give you a great answer on the cost. Probably the closest example I could give was that Hillcrest Sailor Farm, which had about 600 cows, and that digester was installed in 2006, and they think it was about $900,000. But you know, it's really going to depend a lot on the specifics of your farm, and I think if you're interested in that, you know, feel free to shoot me an email, and I can try to get you in touch with someone who provides, you know, more specific estimates.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Jocelyn asks, can you talk more about the favorable zoning and land use steps that can be taken on the local level?
Sure. I think there's a few things that can happen. So, for instance, when a new technology like this begins to be widely implemented, often local governments are sort of surprised by what happens. They're not prepared for it. And that means that decisions are made at the local land use level that maybe aren't the best informed, and maybe they don't have all of the resources available to them at the time that they need to make that decision. So things that you can do are to, you know, talk to your local government and kind of keep them updated on technological advances, let them know that these things could be happening in their community and they need to have it on their radar. And that means that they might want to, for instance, draft a local wind energy ordinance, which can regulate the way that large-scale wind occurs in that community, such as, you know, setback requirements, height requirements, you even sort of it might even impact the process that a developer would need to go through in order to develop a project, and the ordinance could establish, what kinds of information that developer needs to provide to the local government. And if you plan for those things ahead of time, you'll know to ask for them, so you're not taken by surprise. And I think Penn Future has really come up with a few good examples of that type of ordinance, if you want to take a look at that.
Okay, thanks. Debbie asks, years ago, a small company claimed to have created a small wind generation system that would be the size of a chimney and go on top of a roof. Have you ever heard of any development or public access to this system?
That I'm not sure if it's the same system, but that makes me think of a system called Wind Stacks, and they're a wind energy manufacturer actually here in Pittsburgh, and they have created it's a vertical turbine, so as opposed to the spinning blades, it sort of looks like a chimney, but it's a little bit bigger. I've seen them maybe about 20 feet tall to about 40 feet tall. I think they have several sizes, but they're a little more, they don't take up quite as much space, and they are a really cool technology. I just saw one of them installed at a commercial site, and it was pretty exciting to see that happen. So if you're interested in that, I think the name is Wind Stacks, STAX. You should check them out.
Thanks. And just one follow-up comment from Joe on his question earlier was, saying that it's best to work with an aggregator.
Okay.
So I don't have any more questions. So with that, I'll just ask Ryan if you have any final closing comments.
No, I just really want to thank everyone for taking time to join this webinar. I want to thank Pasa for hosting it. I really enjoyed it. I'm always excited to talk about renewable energy possibilities, especially for our Pennsylvania farmers. And if you have any questions that come to you later, feel free to shoot me an email or get in touch with Jesse, and we'll try to make any resources that we have available to you. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Ryan, and thanks everyone else for joining us. I hope you all have a good night.